5 crowns in the Bible. Actually, there's 6 crowns in the Bible, but the 6th one is the diadem, and that's like the kingly crown, and we really only see it in Revelation when it talks about either Satan wearing it or Jesus wearing it or the dragon wearing it, so not one we're going to really deal with that. But the victor crown, or the Stephanos in the Greek, is the crown that we're talking about today or tonight. This victor's crown in the Greek games was an olive wreath, if you've seen. They put an olive wreath on their head when they would win a race or a victory. And the reason they did that, which is kind of interesting, I thought, because in today's Olympic Games, we give them a gold medal that's supposed to last forever till they sell it. But in those days, they gave them a wreath of olive that came from the orchard or the olive grove where the Greek games originated. And the reason they did that was because after the games, they would lay them down, and of course, they would just wither away. And it was to remind them that excellence is something you have to continually strive for. It's not something you get and then you have it. It's something you continually try to do. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But that's the wreath or the crown that Paul talks about, that John talks about. And, you know, in our life, in our Christian life, Christianity is not always easy, right? And I said this morning, we talked a lot about that, and I said, but the reward is great. And in the Bible, we talk about these rewards or these crowns of achieving something, crowns of achievement, the prize. In Revelation 22, it says, "Behold, I'm coming quickly, and my reward is with me." So it's kind of an interesting idea, isn't it? We talked this morning about standing before the judgment of God, about all that idea. But in Revelation 22, he says, "My reward is with me, to render every man according to what he has done." So, you know, as much as we talk about judgment, as much as we talk about punishment, we talk about reward and Christ bringing that reward and what that means for you and me as Christians. And do we all receive the same reward? And can we all get all these crowns? And what are these crowns? And what do they mean? And so that's a good question. I'm really glad you asked, because I'm going to try to describe that to you tonight, what these are. The first crown is the imperishable crown. The imperishable crown is a crown that is different than the perishable crown, right? And like I said, in the Greek games, the crowns were perishable. In other words, you would win it, but then it would wilt, it would fade, it would eventually turn back into dust. And so that crown was a perishable crown. It didn't endure. And Paul uses that illustration in 1 Corinthians 9. He says, "Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win. Everyone who competes in the games exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. Therefore I run in such a way as not without aim. I box in such a way as not beating the air. But I discipline my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified." It's an interesting thing what Paul says, because he says he can be disqualified, right? He says he runs to get this wreath, this imperishable wreath, and he does it in a methodical way. He does it in such a way that he has an aim. He doesn't just beat in the air. He disciplines his body to make it my slave. I like King James. He says, "I buffet my body," and that tells us where to go eat after church. "I buffet my body daily," Paul says. So you know, when you talk about this idea of punishing himself, you know, I punish myself, right, so that I can not be disqualified. So in order to get this wreath, this crown, we can all get this crown. This is a crown, this is one crown that everybody in here can get. Matter of fact, we should be striving to get this, because this is a crown that is imperishable. It's never going to fade away. But Paul says there's a way to get this. If you look at 2 Timothy 2, he says, "Suffer hardship with me as a good soldier of Christ. No soldier in active service entangles himself in the affairs of everyday life." So, you know, Paul's making this comparison. 2 Timothy, very last letter, Paul writes, right? And he says, no soldier in active service entangles himself in the affairs of everyday life. So, in other words, to get this crown that we all want to get, that we all should get, I mean, this is an important thing to have. In order to do this, we don't want to get entangled in this life so that we don't so that we don't get that. The other thing is we can't cheat. You know, that's what Paul says here. He says you can't cheat. You know, if you're running that race, you can't take the shortcut. You can't cheat, is what Paul's saying. You have to compete according to the rules. You know, there's the rules that God puts into place, things we have to do, things we have to follow. And you and I, we have to compete in the right way to get this crown. We're not going to get this if we cheat. You know, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about so many athletes, so many Olympic athletes and Tour de France athletes that, you know, over the years have lost their crown. They've lost their prize, haven't they? Because it came to light that, oh, they cheated. Oh, they didn't follow the rules. You know, maybe they were really good at it. Maybe they were really sneaky. Maybe they even got away with it for a long time. But eventually it came to light, and they said, we're going to take that away from you. Because guess what? You didn't do it the way you're supposed to do it. You didn't do it according to the rules. You know, Jesus talks about that in John 10, doesn't he? He says if we're going to get into the sheepfold, we got to go in through the door. If we come up any other way, we're a thief and a robber, and we come to break in and steal, but we must go in through the door. We must go in the right way. There is one way to God. Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes to the Father except by me. That idea that you and I not only have to get this crown, this imperishable crown that's never going to fade away, but we do it by doing it the way God tells us to do it and doing it in the method God tells us to do it. So it's really important that when we finish this race, and in this case, our race is our life, right? When we finish this race, we're going to receive this imperishable crown. So the imperishable crown is a crown that all of us can get. It's available to everyone. As a matter of fact, if we're Christians and we're going to heaven, we should get this. We should have this imperishable crown. That should be what we get. That's what we have. So, you know, like I said, you can get different crowns here. You can have more than one crown. You know, and I know some of you are overachievers. You want to try to get all the crowns. There's a few of these crowns you really don't want to get because it's really bad, but you can get them. You know, you can get them. So, I mean, we're going to talk about that. So this one's an everybody crown, the imperishable crown, and Paul talks about that. The other one's a crown of rejoicing, and I call this the evangelist crown. And I really love this crown. This crown to me is so important to my life. And that's making a difference in the life of someone else. You know, that's what this crown is. It's a crown of rejoicing. It's when it turns out the way it's supposed to turn out. You know, in my life, that doesn't always happen, unfortunately. But this is a crown that's about changing someone's life and being able to look at that person and say, I made a difference in that life. They're better. They're a Christian, maybe. A lot of people say, well, this is a conversion crown. You know, I've heard that. This is a conversion crown. I really don't go along with that so much. This is a crown where Paul is looking at these churches and he's saying, you're my crown, you know, because of how you are, because of how you act, because of who you are. It's a wonderful crown. It's the best crown, I think. It's a crown that says you changed somebody. You know, they're a better person because you're there. And I think that's the best crown. I love this crown, the crown of rejoicing. And that's exactly what it is. It's about rejoicing. 1 Thessalonians, Paul, writing to the church in Thessalonica, says, for who is our hope or joy or crown of exaltation? Rejoicing in King James. Is it not even you in the presence of our Lord Jesus that is coming? Is it not you? Don't you see what Paul's saying? It's you. You're the joy. You're the crown. And I love this. I love this whole thought, you know, because there's people that I've had in my life that hopefully I'm their crown of rejoicing. You know, hopefully they're rejoicing because they changed me. They made me better, different. And there's people in my life, numerous people that have done that. I'm a better person because of them. And that's an amazing thought. I just love this whole idea, what Paul says. If you look at Philippians 4, therefore, my beloved brethren, whom I long to see in my joy and crown, in this way I stand firm in the Lord, my beloved. What an amazing passage Paul writes to the church in Philippi, right? The sweetheart church, we call that of Paul. Philippians. And he writes to this and he says, my beloved brethren, I love it twice in this passage, he used the word beloved. My beloved brethren, whom I long to see, my joy and my crown. You see, that's an amazing thing to have. That's an amazing crown to have. The crown that says, you mattered. You made a difference. You changed somebody. You helped somebody. Somebody's better because of you. I've failed so many times in people's lives, I can't even count it. Can't even count it. But there's a few people in the world, just a few, that when I think about them, I think, I made their life better. And that's good. That's the best, if you can say that about somebody in your life. Paul talks about churches, but it could just as well be a person or an individual, a family member, somebody that you love or care about, maybe somebody that you did the right thing at the right time and maybe you helped them to be a better person. But I love this crown. The next one's the crown of righteousness. You know, the crown of righteousness is a crown that it's about finishing. You know, the crown of righteousness is about finishing. That's the best way I know to tell you what this is. It's when you finish. You know, I say all the time, starting your walk with God is really important. But you know what? It ain't how you start, it's how you finish. Just telling you. You got to finish. If you don't finish, it don't count. Very end of Paul's life, 2 Timothy 4, Tamartine dungeon in Rome, right? Very end of Paul's life. Last letter of Paul, as far as we know. Last letter of Paul we have. He says, I fought the good fight, I finished the course, I have kept the faith. In the future there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all those who loved his appearing. You know, it's about those people who long to be with Jesus, who long to see Jesus, who long to finish and to be with the Lord. It's a crown that I hope we all get. We all need to have this crown. This is an important crown. This is a crown that says we're not only going to finish this battle, we're not only going to finish our life, but we're going to do it for God. We're going to do it with the Lord. And at the end of our life, when we say, I fought the good fight, I finished the course, I've kept the faith. You know, if you can say that at the end of your life, how much more important is that probably than at the beginning of your life, saying that you believe in Jesus Christ? It's very important, isn't it, to be able to say this at the end of your life, that you finished. And if you have, then that's what this crown of righteousness is. Starting things is always easy for me. I can start a million things. I've started a million things. I've got a million things that aren't finished. I've got things that will never be finished. Don't even get me started. But the truth is that I don't always finish stuff. You know? Sometimes I give up. Sometimes I get discouraged. Sometimes I throw in the towel. Sometimes I sell it for scrap iron. Sometimes a Mexican buyer comes along and says, I'll give you this much for it. And I say, take it away. I never want to see it again. You know, sometimes I just don't finish. And this is about finishing. So I hope at the end of my life, the one thing I finished is this. And the rest of it, if it's not done, it's not done. I don't care. I really want to leave a lot of stuff undone when I die just to irritate people. But, you know, this I want to finish right here. I want to finish this, right? I want to finish this. This one's one you don't want. I mean, it's a good one. You don't want it, okay? This is what I call the martyr's crown. It's the crown for people who are going to die or be severely persecuted for the cause of Jesus Christ. It's not a crown I've ever wore. Maybe a crown we never will wear. It's different. It's tough. It's something different. It's a martyr's crown. In James 1:12, blessed the man who perseveres under trial, for once he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love him. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial. It's really better in Revelation. This is the church in Smyrna. Bill's doing Revelation with you. Smyrna church is one of the only two churches that didn't have any condemnation in the book of Revelation. In Revelation 2:10, it says, do not fear what you're about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison so that you will be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. That's why we call it the martyr's crown. because this is a crown that not everybody's going to get. And trust me, you probably don't want it, but it's a big deal. The people in the world over the course of history that have wore this crown have paid for their faith with their blood. It's a big thing to have this crown. If you're in heaven and you have that crown, it's a big thing. You're one of those under the altar crying out, how long, that have been martyred for the sake of Christ. Not a crown I want, really. It's a crown I hope I would be brave enough to have. I hope I would be a good enough Christian, a good enough person to have it, but it's not a crown that, I guess maybe you shouldn't say it, but it's a crown I hope none of us in here ever had to wear this crown. This is a tough one here, the crown of life. The last one is the crown of glory, and that's the leader's crown. Only place it's mentioned is in 1 Peter 5. Shepherd the flock of God among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but voluntarily, according to the will of God, and not for sordid gain, but with eagerness, nor yet as lording it over those allotted to your charge, but proving to be examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. So that's another crown that all of us are not going to get to wear, right? I might never get to wear this crown. Never been an elder. I might never get to wear this crown. I've always just been a preacher. So maybe this isn't a crown for me. I don't know, but it's a crown that is for those people who lead. The only place in the Bible it's mentioned. Not a crown every one of us is going to get, every one of us is going to have, but it's an important crown. It's a different crown, the crown of glory. Different crown. You know, when you look at these 5 crowns in the Bible, you see they're all different. They all mean different things. Some crowns are for all of us. Some crowns only certain people in history are ever going to wear. Some crowns only certain people in the church are ever going to wear. But we all have the ability to at least get a couple of these crowns, and we need to try to understand that this is our eternity. This is what we're looking for. This is the prize. This is the glory of Christ when he appears. We don't want to be there without a crown. We should all have one of some kind. We should all have one. You know, in Philippians 3, it says, not that I have already obtained it or have already become perfect, but I press on, so that I may lay hold of that for which also I was laid hold of by Christ Jesus. Brethren, I do not regard myself as having laid hold of it yet, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and reaching forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. You know, I don't know a lot about life sometimes, but I do know one thing. I have to keep moving forward with the gospel, and I have to keep moving forward with God in my life. I have to press on towards the goal that I know exists. Sometimes I get discouraged. Sometimes we all do. Sometimes we get run down. Sometimes we feel persecuted. Sometimes things don't go our way, but we just have to remember where we're trying to get. You know, I always think of that. I always think of that guy, that football player, you know. Always comes to my head. That football player, that running back, you know, it's a terrible thing to play, isn't it? Because, I mean, everybody hits you. You know, and that running back that's sitting there, and the ball's on the 1-yard line, and all that guy's got to do is get a yard, you know. I always think about that, 1 yard. And I always think how hard sometimes it is for him to get that 1 yard. You ever think about that? You know, sometimes they don't make it, do they? Sometimes they get 4 tries. Sometimes they get a penalty, get 8 tries. They still don't get that 1 yard. That 1 yard is unattainable. They got the goal. It's right there in front of them, but they can't get across that goal line. You know, as Christians, there's a million things to keep us from getting across that goal line. Whether we're at the 99-yard line at the other end and we got to go the whole run and we're young, or whether at the end of our life and we're on the 1-yard line, we still got to get across that goal line. And there's a lot of things in life that are trying to keep us from doing that every day. But we have to keep a focus on that goal. You know, there's a prize. The Bible tells us there's a prize. The Bible tells us there's a crown. The Bible tells us that Jesus Christ is going to bring the reward with him when he comes. You know, I'm not coordinated. I'm no good at sports. If you know me, you know this. I'm one of them people that nobody wants on their team ever. And always been that way. And when I was a little kid, it was terrible. I mean, my last name was W, so I was always at the end whenever anybody picked everything. And whenever anybody picked teams, they hoped there was not another one with me because they just wanted me to be the odd man that was on the bench because they didn't want me to play. You know, I have no athletic ability. And the truth is that I was never good at competing. I never got any prizes, is what I'm trying to say, when I was a kid in school. I never got a prize for running a race or winning a ball game or any of that stuff. Might have got a few band prizes somewhere along the way, but that's a geek thing. But anyway, but I never got any prizes for my ability as an athlete. But that doesn't matter, because the only prize I really want to get in my life is heaven. The rest of it isn't going to mean anything. This is one race we need to finish. This is one crown, wreath we need to wear, because our eternity depends upon it. So anyway, I hope you found this interesting. I don't know that I ever really thought about there being 5 crowns in the Bible until maybe about 3 days ago. And then it came, and then I found it, and I thought, there's a sermon. So I did it. So now you got it. So thanks for your time tonight. And if we can help you in any way, won't you let it be known while we stand.